Russia's unilateral repatriation of 6,000 Ukrainian soldiers' bodies, a dramatic turning point in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Russia has chosen a tactic not unfamiliar in the annals of military history, one that spans from Europe to Asia, using the bodies of enemy soldiers as a weapon. And yet, no one can outright condemn them for doing so. In fact, it is, in many ways, a profoundly humanitarian gesture. Thousands, perhaps tens of thousands, of Ukrainian families are still desperately waiting for news of their loved ones. For them, this Russian action is not a psychological operation. It is a deeply appreciated act of compassion. The Russians took considerable risks on the battlefield to retrieve the remains of their adversaries. They transported them back, preserved them, identified them, using dog tags and documents, conducted DNA testing, and stored them in refrigerated facilities. These efforts are not only logistically complex, but also financially burdensome, work that few nations in history have been willing or able to do. However, by unilaterally handing over more than 6,000 bodies, Russia has put the Ukrainian government in a precarious position, akin to a checkmate in chess. Kyiv now finds itself trapped in a situation with no easy way to respond. Any move could worsen its strategic position.
From the moment Vladimir Medinsky,
Russia's chief negotiator and presidential aide, announced the unilateral repatriation of over 6,000 Ukrainian bodies, the Ukrainian government appeared caught off guard. Defense Minister Rustem Umerov, Kyiv's lead negotiator, scrambled to respond with a statement claiming that both sides had agreed to exchange 6,000 fallen soldiers each. His words were likely an impulsive media maneuver, a quick counter to avoid a one-sided public relations defeat. But as Medinsky later pointed out, Ukraine does not have 6,000 Russian corpses to return. In fact, in every past body exchange between Russia and Ukraine, the ratio has been overwhelmingly disproportionate. One Russian soldier for dozens of Ukrainians. Only days after the negotiations concluded, the Ukrainian leadership was faced with unanswerable question. First, where will they find 6,000 Russian soldiers' bodies to exchange as Umerov promised? Second, if they accept the return of 6,000 Ukrainian soldiers, then, by Ukrainian law, each family is entitled to 15 million hryvnias, approximately $360,000 USD. Verifying and accepting all these remains could place an additional $2.5 billion burden on an already strained national defense budget. And the story doesn't end there. According to the Russian Ministry of Defense, up to 100,000 Ukrainian soldiers have been killed, severely wounded, or captured, meaning more such returns could follow. Former Pentagon analyst Michael Maloof also speculated that Ukraine's hesitancy may stem from financial concerns. "I think they're overwhelmed by the numbers," he told RT. "I've heard estimates upward of $1 billion they would have to pay families. That's enormous pressure, isn't it?" Third, there's the issue of public perception. Kyiv has long portrayed the war as one in which Russia employs human wave tactics, willing to sacrifice countless soldiers for minimal territorial gains. If the truth comes out that Ukraine has suffered heavy losses and has little leverage in return, it could deeply shock Ukrainian society and its foreign backers alike. Such a revelation could demoralize Ukrainian troops and erode President Zelensky's credibility both at home and abroad. What will Zelensky's administration do now? Russia has already begun releasing the names of fallen Ukrainian soldiers online. A drastic scenario could unfold if Kyiv refuses to accept the bodies. The Russian military might transport the refrigerated train cars filled with corpses across the Belarus-Ukraine border and deliver them directly to the families. If that happens, Zelensky will be left with no escape route, and the emotional footage of Ukrainian relatives retrieving their loved ones' remains could be broadcast globally, triggering a massive media backlash.
As a former entertainer,
Zelensky is surely aware of how catastrophic this narrative would be, and is likely doing everything he can to prevent it from playing out. One telling detail from the latest negotiations in Turkey: both sides communicated in Russian. In fact, several members of the Ukrainian delegation spoke Russian more fluently than Ukrainian. According to a Russian official, even Zelensky's cabinet meetings are often conducted in Russian because it is more widely understood. This war will undoubtedly go down in history for its examples of courage, cunning, determination, and technological ingenuity on both sides. Russia has used fiber-optic-controlled drones immune to jamming. Ukraine has launched attacks deep into Russian territory using truck-borne drones. Russia has retrofitted Soviet-era bombs with smart wings to create cheap but precise missiles. Ukraine has developed unmanned motorboats to strike the Russian Navy. Only through extraordinary bravery and sheer will have both sides managed to sustain the war to this point. But it is heartbreaking to witness hundreds, even thousands of Slavic lives lost each day. The tragedy lies in the fact that Russians and Ukrainians were once comrades, even brothers. The roots of mighty Russia trace back to Kyiv. Their languages are nearly identical. It is perhaps due to these similarities that Ukraine has been able to retain much of its territory after 3 bloody years of fighting a vastly larger, resource-rich superpower. It is truly painful to see so many of the same bloodline fall, whether killed or left with permanent injuries, no matter the cause. This war is a cruel lesson for humanity, and we can only hope that someday this conflict will end, and that the people of Russia and Ukraine may live peacefully side by side again. Because the one thing we cannot change is our neighbor.